Detours, brought to you by Sports and Spokes, the magazine for wheelchair sports and recreation. As a proficient multi-sport athlete, Harsh Thakkar has found both purpose and identity in a leadership role with the NRH Punishers Division I basketball team. Named the 2022 Disabled Advocate of the Year, Thakkar spearheads the adaptive sports and fitness program at MedStar National Rehab Hospital in Washington, D.C., where he shares his motivation through both sports and wellness programs. Welcome, Harsh. I really appreciate you coming in.
Oh, thanks for having me, Bob. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be here and excited to share a little bit about my path and my journey.
Hey, Harsh, so many of the people I interview, I mean, it's so top heavy with people who have been in diving accidents and car accidents and motorcycle accidents. And unfortunately, you fell into one of the rarer categories, gunshot wound. Boy, that had to have been a pretty traumatic situation at only 19 years old.
Yeah, absolutely. What's crazy about all of it is like you're meeting people in adventure-based elements. A gunshot wound is a different element of an adventure that unfortunately I had to go through, and it was traumatic. It was a completely different experience. In the world of spinal cord injuries, gunshot wounds are actually in like the top 5 elements of the ways that people obtain spinal cord injuries. So as much
Oh, no
as
kidding.
yeah, as much as I am like part of the rarity within like some of the adventure or adaptive sports elements, it is something that happens consistently, unfortunately, again, like you said, not something anyone imagines is going to happen to them, but certainly not. Obviously, no one wants to get injured. No one wants to go through any sort of traumatic incidents, and then having to go through something like that was definitely challenging and kind of like hard to wrap your head around, especially when it comes to this like all known question of like, why me, you know?
Well, I think all of us go through the why me, but then it comes up to a point in time where you just have to get past that if you want to move on with life. And you did. So 2005, few years later, you get introduced to sports. And for the first time, it seems to me, from everything I've experienced, learning about you, is that you were very active before, and then the activity, once again, getting back to recognizing your physicality and being able to do things again was really meaningful to you. Did sports push you forward?
Absolutely. I would say sports have always been my savior. I still to this day claim basketball, whether it's in a wheelchair or not, is like the first love of my life. It was something that I ended up losing when I first got injured, was the elements of being an athlete, was using my body a different way, um, you know, stress relieving, mental stability, all of those things for me always had come from physical activity and sports in general. And so during that interim period of my injury before reintroduction to sports, it was a dark period because all I could think about was all of the sports I played and I did it and how I did it. And then losing that function was certainly like a difficult place in my life, I guess you can say.
So you get over to Edinburgh University in Pennsylvania, and this is where you're finally getting tied in as an adaptive athlete. It seems to me what I also understand is that getting out on the court made you really recognize that there was a real opportunity. This wasn't just fake athletics. This was really an opportunity to once again enjoy the things that you really loved.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like, even prior to going to Edinburgh University, I started playing wheelchair basketball within the first year of my injury locally with an organization that I work for now as the National Rehab Hospital. They had a wheelchair basketball program. So I started playing locally just to kind of like get my feet wet and I started to enjoy the sport and then realized that there was like a greater potential of not just doing it at a recreational level. Even prior to my injury, college athletics was an aim and a goal of mine. And so I was like just getting to a point in my life prior to my injury of like figuring out how I was going to get into athletics at a collegiate level. And so to be presented the opportunity after an injury, after having a spinal cord injury was it was mind blowing in the very beginning to even understand that wheelchair athletics existed at a collegiate level.
I think it's important for everybody to stay physical, whether you're on your feet or whether you're in a wheelchair. But you've done both. I did both. And I think that we can pretty well ascertain that it's a really positive thing. But do you think that in a way that having experience as an able-bodied and in a chair, that it's even more critical towards forward movement and happiness and just bringing more joy to your life, being active?
I will speak for my case. It was one of the first things that brought me joy back after my injury. It like getting back on a basketball court, even if it was in a wheelchair, just meant like I was back in a surrounding space that I found to be my home or comfort in. So absolutely agree with your statement. And I will vouch from again, like my own personal accord that wheelchair athletics or athletics as a whole played a pivotal part in my journey, and like feeling comfortable in my own skin again came from like the elements of sports as much as it came from the elements of life.
No doubt about it. I floundered around for a few years before finding my sport, and it opened up a whole world I didn't even know existed. So you touched on this at MedStar National Rehab. You're the manager of community outreach and a director of the adaptive sports and fitness program. You've got a lot of things on your table there. I know you do a lot of mentoring also. So I'm just curious because I know that you do speak to people who are new to the world of disability and potentially adaptive sport. Where's the fine line, and how do you go about understanding when you speak to someone new between getting a little too intense on them or perhaps scaring them off? Where is the fine line, and how do you identify that?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. It is meeting the person where they are, not where you want them to be. Um, that's usually my primary motto in introducing people not only to the life of somebody with a disability, but also to somebody who may be engaging in adaptive sports. You have a plethora of people, just as we have gone through our journeys. You have people that, let's say, they got injured in an incident where they were doing something such as an adventure sport. They were doing something such as adventure sport. They do not want to go back to that right away. And some people are like, the only thing I look forward to doing is doing that again. Um, so when you have these like two completely separate mindsets, or these like two different forces of the same person where they're like, "Hey, I got injured skiing. The only thing I look forward to doing is skiing." Or you have somebody that goes, "I got injured skiing. I don't ever want to be on a ski again." And so meeting the person where they are and helping them get through like the avenues of life that they're currently having challenges with. A lot of times, like those individuals are having challenges with re-identification of their own body, them not feeling like they have control of things, them not feeling like they have any independence. And so if we can get to a point of channeling some of those factors, and like why is it that they need their whole body for them to feel independent, I think is a question that I ask them a lot, is what makes you think you can't do the things that you used to be able to do? And most people don't really have an answer to that. They just know that it's going to seem and it's going to feel different. And outside of that, they don't truly know what it is about not being able to use their full body that actually drives that feeling of like not wanting to engage in different activities or different sports or just life in general.
Harsh, as you think back over the years of being a mentor and talking to people and doing all these good things, can you isolate one or two? I mean, just one. I mean, if you could think of one person or one time that you really motivated somebody, is there one that sticks out in your mind?
There is, and there, like you said, there's been ebbs and flows to this. I started working within this like parameters of this position about 10 years ago. Prior to that, I was a volunteer at the National Rehab Hospital, just coming in and talking to newly injured spinal cord injury folks. And it was within my first 3 years of being employed here, working in this like wellness program capacity, mentoring people, where I had an individual that was very gung ho about not wanting to leave his house because of how society was going to portray him. Um,
I know this person.
yeah, yeah, we know that person. I think we
Yeah.
may have even been that person, you know?
I don't want to have a ramp in front of my house. I don't want anyone to know I'm in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
Newsflash.
Yeah, absolutely. There is no hiding it. And I mean, if
Yeah.
there is hiding it, then you're basically secluding yourself. And so this individual was very gung ho about not doing those elements of his life. And this had nothing to do with sports. And it wasn't until like a year later of mine and his interactions that he reached back out to me and he was like, you know what? I am ready to explore the next element of my life. And this has happened periodically with different people, and this is probably the first one that I learned like to leave them where they are while still being a support to them. That doesn't mean you have to exclude yourself away from their life. You can still check in on people, you can still ask them what's going on. But he reached out to me maybe, yeah, like I said, a year after him being discharged from the rehab hospital and was like, "Hey, I think I'm ready for the next step." And for him, the next step was just being visible and was trying to be part of the disabled community, which I think that in itself is one of like the biggest kind of hurdles to get over. Is understanding that like the next step doesn't have to be you want to go be a professional athlete. It just can be just want to do the next thing that's available for me.
That's really incredible. Harsh, also, you're involved with a program called No Limits. You offer, sports and activities and so much more. I'm kind of curious as to how you go about implementing programs. So, within your job, there's probably a lot of people to convince, but at the same time, there's probably a lot of support also. So, take us through implementing your ideas and translating them into reality.
Yeah, that's actually that's amazing that you're asking that because a lot of times people see the end result and they don't see everything that goes into it during the process. And so, the No Limits program is specifically our adaptive fitness program, which started again about 10 years ago. And in that, what we do is we recruit people that have had neurological disabilities and disorders. And how we do this is like it can be a new patient, it can be somebody that has been part of the community for a while, just doesn't know how and in which ways to get involved with different activities. And so the first will be just like a general intake of understanding like where it is and what it is that they want to do and what they want to accomplish. Doing some using some like motivational interviewing techniques to just see where they are, see what they're ready for, and then like what may be the best fit for them. So that's like the end of like the getting the people into the doors of like participating in the programs. And then you have people such as our such as our fitness trainers and other individuals that kind of promote the program not from the avenues of therapy but from the avenues of just general well-being. That was the transition. That's how this program kind of came to be. The fitness program was we were noticing that people left therapy and just still just kept coming back to therapy because they didn't have other outlets for physical activity. They correlated therapy to their only means of physical activity. And so we were fortunate enough to have a donor and a funder that basically said, all right, run some fitness programs. And this can be anything from an hour class of weight training, or it can be a boxing based fitness class, or it can be a jujitsu based fitness class. It can be a seated yoga class. And then so just a basic introduction to getting them to understand that like physical activity is not just therapy. That's where you make that shift and that's where you go, okay, whether you are a disabled individual or whether you're an able-bodied individual, you can still participate in an active lifestyle. So we have our trainers in our fitness program that also promote the same view. They understand that there are going to be some diagnoses of people that will always require a level of assistance, even if it's in a gym setting. And so those people play a huge part in getting everyone to understand that um, that physical activity, again, is not just for your body, but it is also for your mind. And so we incorporated the wellness element of it.
We'd like to take a minute to thank our sponsor, Sports and Spokes Magazine. For nearly 50 years, they've produced stories on iconic athletes performing at the top of their game, given generational coverage of sports dating back to the 1970s, and they've shown the way with exciting and timeless magazine cover shots. To stay on top of all the latest news from the world of high performance adaptive sports, go to sportsandspokes.com. Sports and Spokes, the magazine for wheelchair sports and recreation. You must in some ways be just astounded at the multitude of sports that's now available. I mean, sports activity, whatever it is you wanna do, I mean, it's pretty well sky's the limit at this point.
Yeah, and it's grown drastically. I mean, it's so funny now. I catch myself being this individual that I used to have people in my corner when I first got injured. They used to be like, "You guys have it so good. Your wheelchairs are lighter. Your wheelchairs are better. You can participate in 100 different sports." Whereas, when I first got injured, even 20 years ago, like the availability of sports of physical activity, they were absolutely not the same. And if you weren't as self-driven, like you wouldn't be able to find them as much. And now even like the elements of social media opens up like the options of availability. So people can just see that it's there and then they can choose what they want to participate in. So definitely a change.
Speaking of things that you can do that people don't even recognize, I noticed, there was, this that it was pretty interesting. I guess you had a discussion with your family about, going on vacation, and, everybody kept wanting to go to the beach because, well, the beach is outside of sand, it's pretty easy. There's boardwalks and things to do,
Yeah.
and finally, one day you said, I miss being outdoors." So you took a pretty good outdoor adventure. You did some time up in Yosemite, some of the state parks. Um, how did you find the accessibility and in general, talk about what it was like to be back outdoors again? Was it really fulfilling?
It was, and it was the most fulfilling part was doing it together. Again, like an element of life that you end up kind of taking advantage of prior to an injury or prior to a diagnosis that kind of limits or changes the way that you do things was you never had to think twice about doing things with a family or friends or whatever. You just were like, "Hey, we're gonna go this weekend and we're gonna go to the beach. We're gonna go this weekend. We're gonna go on a hike or whatever the case may be." And so I found the fulfillment doing it with my family, going to the national parks and different things like that, really exhilarating because now we could do things even if we had to plan ahead, even if we had to like be careful of what the accessibility components were or just be aware of them. At that point, like my family was pretty much independent in their own recognition of what I could and could not do. It
Mhm.
wasn't just my own, right? Because a lot of times people with disability think like just because they have gotten to a level of independence, they think everyone else should follow suit with them. And so when I say and speak from my family's perspective of their level of understanding my independence, also gave them independence. So like now they could go for a hike differently and like then I would still go wander the parks in the more accessible areas that I still could, without it being this like, oh, we can't go on this hike because Harsh can't go on this hike.
It sounds to me like what you do, with the rehab center is much more than a job to you. You seem very passionate about it. You advocate not only for the disabled community, the adaptive community, but for individuals in and of themselves. Is it as an advocate, as someone who goes and speaks on a national level, what is the reception that you feel you're getting out in public, and is the whole situation moving forward in your opinion?
Advocacy in itself, I believe that there are many platforms that are moving forward. Obviously, just like anything else that requires a mass level shift or change, something such as like infrastructure or barriers that are more of like the physical environment, I think those things are going to take a lot more time because they have many things legislations and different elements that need to be passed prior to those things happening. I do believe through my advocacy attempts and efforts that they are and have changed and pushed forward. I, at the same time, in the elements of further work that needs to be done, I think people limit themselves when they put themselves in silos. So when you have individuals fighting for accessibility for somebody in a wheelchair is a little different than fighting for those that may have vision impairments. Um, there aren't very many like national disability encompassing advocacy attempts. I think it started there to get all people with disabilities on board, and then it started to go into silos because everyone does have different needs. What your needs may be different than mine. And so when it starts to go into these silos without bringing the group back together, is where I feel like the work needs to be done a little bit more. So I find that, as you have people with spinal cord injuries have their own national organizations, it's great for them to fight within the space and the things that they need, because people with spinal cord injuries experience a different life than those that may use a wheelchair due to different reasons. However, some of the challenges and barriers are pretty much across the board, and a lot of times I think that's where the work of collaborating back together after you've done your part within your silo spaces needs to be done a little bit more.
Great stuff, Harsh. Favorite sport and why?
Oh, that's a tough. Basketball is always going to be my favorite. It's been a love. It's been a place where I shut off everything else in the world without having to try. I don't have to disassociate in order for me to like shut the world off. It comes naturally. Holding a basketball in my hand, dribbling it. I kind of just go away and I remain in whatever element of the sport that I need to be in. My growing favorite sport will probably have to be lacrosse. It has contact, it has finesse, it has a lot of different skills that you need. And then those are both team-based sports. Wheelchair tennis, I picked it up during COVID. It is a sport where you're alone a lot, and I found that to be one of the more thrilling elements of it because I've used to playing more of the team sports elements, and so being on a court by yourself on a tennis court against your opponent, it is all you in there in your brain, and whatever and however your self-talk is for that is where you're gonna end up going.
Hey man, really, really appreciate it. Really, really good stuff today. And Harsh, you're doing a lot of good things out there. Keep doing it, and look forward to seeing you out on the road.
Thank you. Appreciate the time. I'm glad that you guys are doing this. I think it serves a big purpose outside of just athletes. I think awareness to the disability community and understanding the full scope of what people can do. It goes far beyond anything else.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.